thank you, all of you that came here. Thank you also to the organizers for the invitation and opportunity to present. Yeah, I'll be talking about essentially Shadowserver and what we do in response to many of the vulnerabilities that pop up nowadays in edge devices and are usually quickly exploited in some way or other by various kinds of threat actors. And the focus is really going to be on what Shadowserver does to respond to these kinds of vulnerabilities and how we work with the community to actually understand where these vulnerable devices are, what the state of exploitation is, how we actually reverse certain ways of identifying implants or et cetera, if any, or web shells, et cetera, and how we actually broadcast that to the incident responder community worldwide. And this is all done not really just by ourselves, but in collaboration with a lot of other entities that all bring something to the table and hence allow us to do things together that we would not have been able to do by ourselves separately. So maybe a few words about myself. You know, I don't come from the environment that most of you probably come from, which is more vendor-oriented as such. My background is more in the national cybersecurity kind of aspects, incident response on a cyber defense on a large scale. I'm one of the creators of CSIRT.pl, CSIRT Polska, so I've had speakers in the past from my former team here, I think, as well at Virus Bulletin. Like for the last, essentially since 2016, I work for Shadowserver, and Shadowserver, of course, works pretty closely with a lot of governments around the world with providing threat intelligence to them, and of course, CSIRT.pl was one of them. So that's when I got to know the team, and I moved over when I decided it was time for a change. So I'm involved in quite a lot of other nonprofit actions related to honeypots, the HoneyNet project, perhaps many of you have heard of it. Things like First.org, Cyber Peace Institute, which tries to help NGOs, the IVD, which is a Dutch hacker group that also sometimes supports our actions. And well, I remain still a bit technical compared to most other CEOs because we're just 30 people, 30. 20 people actually get paid for this, 10 volunteers. So I spend a lot of time myself developing fingerprints, exploit signatures, et cetera, this kind of stuff, or help with disruptions that we also specialize in as an organization. So a few words about Shadowserver as such. I think, I guess some of you are here, you know the name, but what's really behind this? And we are actually a non-for-profit that is based in the US, a 501c3. We operate essentially a large data center kind of setup in California. There'll be some more details on that later. And we're also a stichting in the Netherlands. So this is like a 501c3 equivalent. So it's a nonprofit with a public benefit status. So we are supposed to be doing things that are for the benefits of all. We are not a commercial organization. You cannot really contract us to do a commercial work as such. If you do contract us to something, it must benefit everybody, right? It can benefit you, but it must also benefit everybody around the world, and we can use that sometimes. So legally speaking, we are two organizations. We also have a third one, which is a registrar of last resort, and that is a DNS domain registrar that is accredited with ICANN, that has the ability to essentially register domains at scale, at reduced costs, or for free, which we use quite often for large-scale domain takedowns. But that's won't be the story today. Maybe tomorrow there'll be a talk by Europol, and they'll touch on some of the operations that this actually helped with. Mission, simple but difficult at the same time, make the internet more secure for all. So we can say we share that with most of you here, I guess. And the way we do this is essentially the most basic thing we do is share information with network defenders at no cost. So basically, we give whole nations, governments, countries, ISPs, any organization that has any network asset, threat intel for free, with the caveat that it's actually just about their network, right? So we don't give data. We don't operate like the rest of the industry does, where you can just come and buy any kind of data. You can search engine like Census, Shodan, get all the data you want there, or some others. We only give you data for your specific network only, but it's for free, right? So that's the good thing. So we kind of raise the baseline of cybersecurity worldwide, giving access to data to entities that normally wouldn't be able to afford it, or at huge scale and very quickly, right? So it works pretty well. You know, the larger the organization you are and the larger network presence you have. So we work quite a lot with national CSIRTs all around the world. Basically, everyone on the planet that has a CSIRT, national CSIRT, would work with us in some way or the other. We work with network owners across all sectors, all types and sizes, law enforcement from the US, UK, EU, Japan, other international organizations like Europol or Interpol. And we also work with security researchers on specific cases when there is a need. We have kind of like 5 basic primary services that we provide. One is essentially global monitoring of the attack surface and victim notification at the same time, right? So essentially, we try to monitor all the exposed endpoints we can find on the planet every single day, 24 hours per day. So we have a snapshot of the entire exposure of the planet, as well as all the victims of any incidents that we can find using, of course, the technologies at our disposal. We use this for large-scale internet-wide early warning. Much of that is nowadays more public in the sense that it also reaches the press, at least the technical ones, so hopefully it reaches more people. We do quite a lot of work for law enforcement, investigations and support. Many takedowns that happen have us somehow involved, either throughout the entire case for many years, or at the end stage where we just distribute the data to the community. We also do a lot of cybersecurity capacity building globally, especially funded by the UK government, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, especially in Africa and the Indo-Pacific. And we do a lot of other funded public benefit projects where we get a grant and we try to improve our services to give data away for free. So we give stuff away for free. We don't sell anything as such, which is always something people ask a question like, okay, so how do you actually sustain all of this? Because it actually costs us $5 million a year just to do this at a base level. The answer is grants, donations, sponsorship at cost project work. We have an alliance partnership model where we try to get entities to sponsor us in exchange for some soft information rather about access to our community, more than actually hard data as such. And that's how we more or less survive. Most of this, 70%, is probably comes from national governments, with the UK being a lead sponsor, but we also get Canada, the EU as such, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and other countries also chipping in. We also get sponsorships from people like Craig Newmark, a billionaire philanthropist who is really very supportive of work such as ours. So who do we serve? This is like a slide that shows essentially everybody, 201 national CSIRT teams from 135 countries, so covering 175 countries and territories. So this is like a large chunk of the planet. Sectoral CERTs, ISACs, regional, state, city governments, hospitals, healthcare, universities, NGOs, critical infrastructure, ISPs. We have over 3,000 ISPs that subscribe to our services. Essentially, everybody that has any network presence. If you have a domain name, an IP space, an autonomous system, or anything that we can attribute to you that's exposed on the internet, you can subscribe to our service, and we give you this data that we see about you for free, right? Which is pretty effective. We have a lot of data sets, like everybody in the industry, I guess, but the primary 4 that are really like truly big data scale are these 4 listed here. So this is basically sinkholing data. We sinkhole 400 malware families, so we have over 1 million, I think, domains sinkholed at a given point in time across 400 malware families, where we can see infected hosts beaconing out to them. This includes criminal botnets, APT botnets, some well-known botnets, less-known malware, things like SolarWinds Sunburst, for example, that is sinkholed by Shadowserver, so we had the biggest visibility into that case, and that also happens across many other cases. Most recent case we had was actually with Google and Human recently sinkholing Badbox2, which is a malware that pre-infected essentially 8 million different Android devices, from TV sets to IP set-top boxes. So this telemetry is all shared automatically with governments, national CSIRTs worldwide as soon as we get it, right? So every single day, so they can track their progress in case of remediation. Won't be talking much about that anymore. Scanning a bit more. So if you know Census, Shodan, and these kinds of services, we scan in a similar manner to them. We have been scanning for the last 11 years, I think. And we try to scan very frequently. So these are daily scans, sometimes even a couple of times a day. And they are very much focused on detecting vulnerable devices, compromised devices, tracking threat actor infrastructure as it moves around the internet. So we collect all the certificates we can grab every day. So this is like many millions every single day, with a pretty large data set in the end, covering the last 10 years of exposure. We never exploit things. We just try to do the checks in benign ways without exploitation. If something involves exploitation, we don't do it. But sometimes other organizations that don't have these constraints, they'll come to us and give us data to share out that was obtained through less ethical means. We don't say no in those cases, and we share the data out. And you'll see some examples later on when I go into more detail. But the interesting thing is that we are probably the top vulnerability scanner for IPv6 addresses. It's nearly 4 billion now, which exceeds the IPv4 space. So that is something that I think also makes us a bit different from most. Again, we share it according to our rules in a responsible way. That is, we don't sell the data, we don't make it available to attackers. You cannot buy it as such. You only get data for your area of ownership in a way, right? So if you're a country, the country CERT gets it. You don't get it for another country. So Germany gets CERT-Bund in Germany gets the data for Germany, but it doesn't get the data for Poland or the Netherlands, right? Sensors. We run sensors, but these are honeypots. So we run a few thousand of them across about 1,000 data centers around the world, every continent, over 100 countries, where they mimic a lot of the devices that are under attack today, right? So a lot of the devices, the edge devices, firewalls, routers, other kinds of appliances or applications, they can be emulated by us. And whenever a new attack comes out, a new vulnerability, if the attacker is doing scanning and they're not really that careful, they will hit your honeypot, or your honeypot will fool their scripts, and you'll make the hit list, and then you can live off that for many months when they keep targeting you in all their follow-up kind of attacks. So that gives us a lot of interesting telemetry, which is pretty clean compared to what you'll get from if you monitor production traffic, right? Because it's all malicious. You just have to decide what is more malicious than the other. Sandboxes as such, so you all know VirusTotal, of course. We have our own VirusTotal internally, so we have about over 2 billion malware samples by hash. We collect over 1 million by hash every day, so it's one of the largest repositories in the world. We have our own antivirus engine we developed based on a lot of ER rules as such, and we also run various antivirus engines. We built our own sandbox technology, and also we run stuff on bare metal. So that also gives us quite a lot of findings there that sometimes you don't get anywhere else. All of this data plus other supporting data sets are shared out daily, again, filtered by ownership to the appropriate responders. So in our sharing model, that's more or less how it works. National CSIRTs, network owners, law enforcement, the basic three kind of like separate kinds of entities that we recognize. More and more often, we have MSSPs that come to us and want data for their clients, and we are always say, yes, that is possible. You'll get the data for free, even though you share it commercially, but you need permission from the clients, right? So we have this crazy model of supporting somebody else's business as well. Well, that's the cost of being a nonprofit. We work also quite often more and more with researchers, and in some cases, we worked with, for example, with Palo Alto or Citrix as such to share information on vulnerable or infected devices, so that they can actually reach out to the affected parties through their own sales channels. So it's not just us broadcasting it to national CSIRTs or network owners, but we use other paths in emergencies as well. Our data, most of it is really low level, very much unprocessed. It's more about the IPs, the other specific indicators of compromise or exposure, rather than high level TTPs or reports, because we solely exist essentially on automation, right? We have 15 petabytes of data, tons of it coming every day. And the only reason we exist with the staff we have is because we try to automate the hell out of everything, right? So as soon as we step out of the automation space, it becomes more challenging to do things. So we focus on the automation, and then we do deep dives into specific problems or topics as they arise. Everything we share is shared in the form of feeds, which are called reports, which are formatted usually as CSV files or JSON, in a way that is adequate to what is being shared. So, for example, information about a vulnerable device or a compromised asset is different than saying that you have an accessible telnet server of some kind. And there are lots of tools, open source and commercial, that actually take this together, parse, normalize it, and automate it. To give you an idea of how much we actually share each day as an event, specific event, related to exposure or maliciousness or vulnerable device, we share about 1 billion every single day. So 1 billion, US billion, that is quite a lot on a daily basis. That's what we broadcast out from our system. As mentioned, you can configure your access to our data through filters of different kinds, autonomous systems, CIDR blocks, delegated IP blocks in the cloud, domains, or geolocation. If your cloud IPs change, we have a way of actually you pushing new IPs every single day so that we can match them with your organization. Again, this is all a free service. You can subscribe without any, with minimal formalities, really. We have a form, a big subscribe to button. We just verify if the subscription is coming from an official account associated with your organization, and do some other checks to ensure that you say you are who you are, and we give you data for your organization. There's no formal agreement in place. All this data actually does require quite a lot of processing. So these are actually pictures from our current data center that we have in Oakland, in California. About 70 racks of machines, 1,100 servers. Original value of equipment there is probably about $40 million. So pretty sizable for 30 people. And this is all managed by 3 people on a daily basis, right? It's all automated as much as possible. That's what we try to do. Otherwise, we die, right? That's the option we have. Again, we see ourselves kind of as the global plumbers, right? If you want to have information reach the right party at the right time quickly, we are probably your best channel. There's probably no way you're going to reach hundreds of thousands of organizations, governments, in another way in terms of like actually getting people to act on an actual incident, right? Basically, in Europe, a lot of the countries, national governments are plugged in to a stream of information coming from us, and they have their own centers where local entities can sign up to them to get our data. And basically, so we give 200 national CSIRTs and about 10,000 network owners data directly. But many of these countries in Europe or North America, Canada, for example, they have their own systems where people subscribe to them and rebroadcast that information. So we have like probably hundreds of thousands of organizations. If you give us something, are going to get the data the same day, right? Or at least the technical people responsible for incident response. So every country that has a national capability, Russia was excluded for reasons we all understand, I guess. And if you look at it from the coverage we have from an autonomous system perspective, so these are like the postal codes of the internet, right? Essentially 69% of autonomous system space is in Europe is subscribed to our feeds, which means that all the largest ISPs get data from us directly, aside from the national government route. 76% in North America, so that's even higher. In other places, Asia, for instance, lower, but then there are some additional complexities in many countries there. But that's our direct coverage as of September. We are funded significantly by the UK government. So when they funded us to actually show a dashboard of high-level statistics of some of the data we were collecting, they asked to put their logo there, which is great. But in general, we have these are statistics coming from Shadowserver as such, and many cases that I'll touch on here are actually you can actually find the data statistics over here, right? So it's everything really I'm talking about in terms of data is public. And again, thanks to the UK government, translated into 75 languages. So it's probably one of the most translated CTI assets on the planet. Again, that includes languages like Zulu, Swahili, Hausa, Yoruba, in a lot of African and also Asian countries. So that's a general introduction to give you an idea where we're coming from. So we are already like supposed to be very collaborative as such, right? And of course, with 30 people, we sit on a lot of data, but we're not going to solve all the problems of everybody has and the industry has as such. But we can help fix certain elements of it. So let's take a dive a bit deeper. So how we do the scanning, again, that is like a separate talk entirely. I can only say that we as such, every single day we scan against hundreds of ports, hundreds of protocols, and collect all the data, and the stream of data comes in, and we have an entire engine on top of that matches all the patterns of all the returning data, certificates, headers, cookies that are being returned, bodies of HTML and all that stuff. And all of that is fingerprinted in accordance with our rules. We have thousands of different rules, and they attribute it to a vendor, product, version, etc. So generally we provide the community with a feed of exposed assets by vendor, etc. And then once on top of that, we have targeted vulnerability scans. So we can use that data to actually seed quickly new scans. So we already know where all the Fortinets are, all the Ciscos are, the Citrixes are, or Microsoft exchanges. We already have that every single day. We have the data internally already collected. And now we can either start mining it to try to identify vulnerabilities based on data already collected. Sometimes it's just about the version, sometimes it's more, or we can execute immediate targeted scans that look for, that issue specific queries that can check if something is vulnerable or not. And that's not always possible without exploitation, and then sorry, that's not for us in the end. We can tell you it's there, but we cannot make an assessment. But if it's possible, we try, right? So when we start doing this, we actually have other teams from our community, which includes governments and other vendors that we have, that actually help us quite often design some of these scans or tell us that we're doing something wrong so that we can get things up and running within hours when something is breaking out, or at least days in the worst case, right? So that is something. The same as well happens with compromised devices, web shells, implants. We usually have some information from local partners on the ground who own these devices. And then they tell us, oh, we were compromised this way. This is how we think you can actually find this remotely. Then we quickly go and implement stuff remotely. I mean, into our scans so that we can actually warn everybody, right? So we learn from the experience of one local infected partner and share out with the community immediately for all similar infections. And that often works pretty well. We never, there are red lines, as I said, so we don't exploit things. We don't actually log in or break into people's panels, this kind of stuff, contrary to what you may believe. We know we've learned over time a lot of tricks in how to identify things remotely, and a lot of the vendors out there, they play also different tricks on people like us to make it more difficult, because presumably they don't really want their numbers that we identify to be in the press, so they hide this. Of course, attackers don't care. They just exploit the systems anyway. It makes our job more difficult. But it's kind of like both an art and a science. So we work with partners that do have things in the lab and can sometimes help us make decisions faster. Initially, when we do scans, we can sometimes have a higher false positive rate because we don't fully understand essentially what we are doing sometimes for obscure or abstract devices. But we do usually get hit on the head immediately by somebody and says, these are like false positives and you're making too much noise, fix this, fix that. And we usually get it right a day or two later, right? So that's the only kind of false positive things. In general, the false positive rates of things, sometimes it's many things we try to keep it at zero, literally. Sharing 1 billion events every single day, if you had false positives, that would be a problem with any percentage, with any percent. So we are pretty low on false positives in the end. We avoid things like directory traversals, post data, any actions that can obtain sensitive information. Otherwise, we try to obfuscate that in some ways, at least the information as such. Avoid write actions on APIs and no credential use ever, right? So we try to be as unintrusive as possible, try not to muddy the waters for other defenders, try not to generate an absurd amount of logs, which is it's also a problem on the other side. Sometimes somebody comes and says, oh, you're generating so many logs on our systems. We don't like you, go away. We try to have this kind of motto, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, so we don't really try to disrupt anything. The problem is we are in everybody's firewalls and everybody's data, so sometimes the funny thing is that sometimes that gets mixed up with a botnet that is hacking them, and then we have to explain the concept that there may be a botnet hacking them in parallel to us actually running the scan, and that it's actually possible and happens all the time, right? So we have a lot of explanations that come with this. But in general, we do not get that many complaints, right? So the abuse levels have fallen down significantly in terms of actually people coming back because we are pretty universally recognized in where we scan from. Sometimes when we've add a new IP range and we forget or something messes up with reverse DNS and we are not easily identified as Shadowserver, we get complaints, and then it's like 10 times more on those IPs than we get on others. So I think the conclusion here is that if you want to start mass scanning on yourself right now, it's pretty tricky. You'll get killed with abuse notifications. So using people like us in collaboration may also make sense. So we are happy in general to collaborate with researchers and vendors on developing new scans. We would then even be able to share with you the technique, if anything. But our kind of condition is always that it helps the community. So we want to implement things that allow us to share data and continue on our mission. So collaboration here is possible, and no, it doesn't involve money. So that's the background for the scanning as such. And then we have the other side, which is the sensors that pick up the scans. So I spent quite a bit of time talking about the scanning. Here we are more interested in the other side as such. So in parallel to all our scans, we often basically just build a honeypot for the devices that we are also scanning for, right? So we want to see the other side of the story. And basically we developed technology to, again, automate everything in 1,000 data centers around the world. So when we want to install a new payload somewhere, we can do that within minutes, hours, globally, roll it out. And our honeypots have the ability to essentially, you can basically take a copy spider, a front web interface of a device and just splash it on the face of our honeypot and emulate things to a certain stage of essentially exploitation, right? So then we have quite a lot of stuff that decodes this, assigns CVEs, classifies incoming attacks by CVE, exploit, blah, 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 different kind of stuff. A lot of the output from that system is actually public. You can look it on the website. We have a known exploited vulnerability tracker that shows all the latest and greatest CVEs we see being thrown against our systems. And sometimes these are like N days, sometimes they're 0 days that we have discovered this way. And then we usually reach out to the vendor to see if that can, well, get a CVE and get fixed. Also, a lot concerns like end-of-life devices that will never get patched, right? So that's also pretty common. A lot of that tracking actually contributes to the known exploited vulnerability catalog as well, or has in the past, which is great from our point of view, and EPSS. If you use any of you use EPSS as a standard in your vulnerability management, we are also one of the contributors, one of the operational data, I think one of the 5 current contributors. So yeah, so when we started that, this was actually kind of like a hobby, or really my kind of hobby, tracking these CVEs. And then it turned out that there was a third party in VulnCheck doing vulnerability management. And they started tracking who was first to report CVEs being exploited in the wild. And imagine our surprise when we ended up on top, which is quite funny if you think about our budgets and the amount of people that we have in place compared to the rest of the industry here, right? So, of course, now it's kind of like getting, I don't want to brag here, but it's kind of like getting a Michelin star, right? So now we are stuck now and we have to be the top, and we cannot let it go. But well, at some point we'll fall off, and the industry will kick us out, of course. But yeah, I think for now I can cheer or pat myself on the back, right? So that was an introduction to where you understand where you're coming from. Now to some more like specific stories. So as you can see, I can talk for a long time about this, but so basically we do these RCE CVEs every week nowadays, right? The pace is crazy, and it seems to be getting crazier, at least will for a while before the trend changes, presumably in 2 or 3 years, since we are probably year 2 or year 3 of a 5-year cycle, more or less, in terms of how these attacks move around. So we have worked in quite a lot of cases regarding these critical CVEs. So as I said, there are three a week or so nowadays. I mentioned some recent, more prominent ones. I'm not going to go into the details of the CVEs. They are not really relevant. I just want to show the kind of like the collaborative part. Here, as a start, like collaboration, CISA thanking us, and Mandiant, we collaborated together on one of the initial very big Citrix cases 2 years back. where it turned out, again, funny enough, that we were actually, despite all the vendors out there, it turned out that we were actually able to have the biggest visibility just by working with all the victims around the world on the specific case. So the way we typically work, and this is like the Citrix NetScaler case, that was like in mid-year 2023, is that when a bulletin comes out or when we get a heads up that there is a vulnerability, we usually already know where all the devices are, right? Because we have the data and we usually have all the signatures developed, especially over time. I mean, it's kind of like, like Chuck Norris trying to classify the internet. We work all the time on this, but there are some repeat offenders, right? So Citrix is well known in this space, and well, this is like one of the more prominent ones a few years back. So when this actually started, we already had device ID in place, so we actually knew where all the devices were. So as soon as the alert happened, everybody that had our free data already knew where the devices were, and they could start searching, looking them up, right? And we immediately learned quite a lot that we were actually missing a lot of these things in our scans. So we got feedback from our volunteers and people on the ground who actually manage these devices to come back to us and tell us, you're missing this one, this one, this one. And we quickly, learned how to identify all of them 100% with 0 false positives, right? So, which was pretty good. And then that serves as a base for future CVEs, which, as you know, it's probably like 20-something since that time. So basically, this was a quick timeline. I'll just whiz through. Just to show our reaction at that time. We're actually a bit better now. That was like one of the earlier large cases. So on the 19th, basically July 19th, 2023, CISA added NetScaler to its kev list. There were already a lot of rumors earlier about people getting hacked through Citrix, and there were some prominent organizations that were there. So we were able to, on the same day that this was like officially announced, we were actually able to help by the community develop first the CVE scan for that, right? So we were able to scan for the CVE without actually knowing what the CVE was. And immediately the next day already data was going out to the community. So that was like the very quick, I hope at that time, response. And nowadays we try to be more visible in our communications. So in some of the bigger cases that we can talk about, we put things out in the public as well. Then, on the same day, CISA updated with information exploitation web shells. We continued to improve our scans for vulnerable instances. So now we were tagging, I think, 15,000 versus the 11 we had initially. The community was searching for what CVE it actually was because there was no public information. So Asset Note started to publish initial information on what CVE 223.3.5.1.9 actually was. And at that point, we were also ready to roll out our first Citrix honeypots. We didn't have any Citrix honeypots at that time. And we were actually able to start observing the other side. And basically, a few days later, a POC was published. We immediately started seeing exploitation attempts explode, right? So thanks to the fact that we were running a Citrix honeypot, you were able to see it. If you were not running a Citrix honeypot, you didn't see any of this. We were running a Cisco honeypot, it would have been 0, right? Because everything now in attacks is already profiled. The attackers already know where all the Fortinets are, the Citrixes are, just like us. And they will go just for them, right? So the trick with a honeypot is to try to fool them and get yourself on a hit list, right? Which is sometimes successful, sometimes not. So we started to get additional information on various China Chopper web shells that were being installed, and this is again by trusted partners, so something we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves, and we were able to develop a scan for web shells. So we were kind of like the first entity that was scanning for web shells, and that was about a week after things went public. And then it turns out that actually working On the web shells, we realized there were way more web shells than we were aware of. And we decided in the end to start publishing what was really going on, because there were no public advisories of any kind, right? So we published a technical blog about all the incidents we worked with the community to actually understand where the web shells were. And we made it public as well a few days later. And thanks to that also, we went into contact with Mandiant, who used a lot of that into their tooling. And then they were called on many incident response cases, and they acknowledged that as well. And together, we were then able to start actually, checking all these devices for any additional kind of like web shells or compromises. So we realized there were like way more different web shells out there. But the problem we face is, again, we try to do things in an ethical way. And we found the way actors were constructing these web shell names. There was a list like of 40,000 or so possible ones. And well, we discussed this and we decided not to scan for every host for 40,000 web shells, because it kind of like makes us look bad when we're brute forcing something. But Fox IT and DIVD, some DIVDs on Ethical Hack Group didn't have that reservations, and they did the scans. So we took their data and shared it out as well. And we found like from 600 and something, we found 1,500 instances out there. So that's again a different kind of collaborative aspect with the industry. So you can kind of see like the different changes when we took that into account. Again, all that data is public. You can go to our website, the dashboard, and select the right CVE and find all that data. So yeah, that's a quick overview here. I think I need to wrap up in 10 minutes. So a case where we worked with quite a lot of players to actually get things done, and that included CISA, Mandiant, a lot of victims, Fox IT, DIVD, etc. None of us, in the end, would have been able to solve all of that and alert the community by themselves. Cisco IOS bad candy implants, that was something that happened autumn 2023. Cisco published a blog about implants on Cisco IOS XE routers and the software management interface. And essentially, as soon as that happens, we monitor all the sources as much as possible, and we immediately check, is this scannable or not, right? And if it is, we immediately try to implement it, and Cisco was nice enough to provide all the details in the blog, so we were able to implement it. Unfortunately, in this story, the attackers were also reading the blog, which meant that the whole thing evolved in a kind of like a race, with Cisco publishing new information, us discovering new information. As soon as our scans were implemented, they will move somewhere else. So you can more or less see that. We immediately rolled out a Cisco IOS honeypot, where we were able to start monitoring the implant scans and updates. And here you can kind of see our scan results. So that's when the attackers changed their implants. So this is now attributed to one of the typhoons. And we had to change our scans. And as you see here, this started with like over 40,000 Cisco routers compromised. And then it kind of like stayed this way, right? And it turned out that, well, the attackers didn't need to update their implants anymore and care about the publications or care about the scans, because everybody that fixed the problem has fixed the problem, that cared about the problem has fixed it. And then there's the remaining 50% that have absolutely no clue how to fix it or don't care, right? And that's part of the problem of our industry, and what we face every day is that they don't have to hide anymore, right? It's all out there, and that is pretty sad. I'll skip the rest of the stats due to time, but this is actually from, 22nd? Yes, that was 2 days ago. This is the amount of Cisco routers still infected by an actor attributed to China, I think, but maybe I'm wrong. And it's all out there, right? So we have all these conferences that we go to and talk about these things, but it's still there, right? Nobody cares. They get hacked all the time. Are hacked, probably multiple groups, everybody, multiple residents. Mexico, US, India, Chile, Peru. It's actually pretty decent in Europe. Europe has cleaned itself up mostly, but other places, not necessarily. Ironically, like end of last year, there was a presentation by ONIF, that's another company that does some scans, about the adversary that was doing all of this. And they had like a closer view of what the actor was doing. I don't know how, right? And I'm not saying anything. But they inferred some interesting things that the actor was targeting tier 2 operators and ISPs, but avoiding Cisco, Shadowserver, Amazon, Microsoft, and Chinese telcos. So I thought Shadowserver kind of didn't fit among Cisco, Amazon, and Microsoft with our scale and size, right? But it's nice to be, at least we can see we have an impact. Palo Alto, so we had a case with Palo Alto as well, where I think the distinctive thing here would be that we actually worked with Palo Alto to help them mitigate this problem, right? So we got tipped off about CVE and the management interface in PanOS devices, and based on that, we actually started learning and understanding where all the management interfaces were, where the vulnerable ones were, and where the compromised ones were. And we actually, unusually for us, because we don't usually do that in the past, we shared information about everything we could find with the vendor. And Palo Alto actually did reach out through their sales channels to get a lot of the problem fixed. And you can see how that worked, how both us and Palo Alto managed to contribute to dropping the exposure, which is like very sharp and very unusual, right? And again, this lot here, well, they don't care, right? So they're not really reachable. So, but still quite a lot of compromised assets in the end, artifacts that we could actually discover on the devices. And we also partnered with a company called Watchtower that shared some POC code with us and methodologies to track for artifacts. And that worked pretty well. And thanks to the fact that we actually developed a PanOS honeypots, we were also able to see what kinds of queries attackers were doing against devices to find compromised, to find artifacts, right? And we were able to replicate their scans to looking for compromised artifacts in our scans. And thanks to that, actually, we were able to identify who was compromised or not. So we actually used our honeypots as well to see who the attackers were targeting. Not an edge device, but made the press recently, right? Everybody heard about SharePoint, so we somehow ended up muddled up in the center of many of the events with iSecurity in the Netherlands actually alerting on mass intrusions, SharePoint compromises. Basically, what happened is that it was Friday evening and then Saturday, and we were all busy trying to do something else. But iSecurity and Watchtower, again, they reached out to us and said, well, we have all these compromised information and all that. Can you help us alert the victims? So all of the entire team basically got on, and we manually contacted quite a lot of the affected parties and added things in our reports as well. So we were doing manual alerting and automated alerting. We managed to get the automated alerting even going on the same day. Then we got a new batch from the IVD as well, who actually did some additional magic to uncover more victims. The trick here with SharePoint was that we needed a fully qualified domain name to actually able to uncover all the SharePoint instances. Just scanning by IP was not enough. And that was really a pain. We worked with LeakX, who also do their own scanning, and they did some more aggressive scanning than we would normally do, but they shared the data with us, so we shared it out, and thanked them as well. And then we worked with a company called Validen and also CSIRTs, the German BSI, the German national CERT, to start finding SharePoints and vulnerable SharePoints much better than previously, and that also compromised instances as well. So you can see how our understanding of exposed SharePoints leapt up once we had FQDN, vhost scanning enabled, right? We added 7,000 or so more exposed SharePoint devices to us. When we started, the day we learned about the SharePoint vulnerability, I think we were able to detect about 9,000. So we managed to improve with over 2 weeks with much higher numbers. And if you're interested about this case, it's actually not really over, because this is still the amount of vulnerable SharePoints that are out there. So that's about, what, 1,400 still out there. And there are incidents happening now that are much more targeted than previously with these SharePoints, except nobody's really talking about them, right? So, and we don't necessarily at this point in time know how to detect them. So the interesting thing is that it made the news, and we ended up even being on the front page of Al Jazeera, which was, I think, quite interesting in this case. We don't usually do that, but that is what happened here. So that was an unusual incident in that from the press aspect as well. But it kind of shows, like, you know, our entry point in the entire case was different. We were not like the initiators of everything. We were kind of like dragged in, but managed to sacrifice 2 weeks to actually get things going and running, right? So it's 50 minutes, so I would like to leave some time for questions. Some takeaways. I'm not going to read through all of them. That's not the point, right? I think the most interesting, I think, is kind of like the last point, is that, you know, we are a nonprofit. Many of you represent vendors or sometimes governments or commercial or other commercial kind of companies. Our intention isn't to compete with you how you sell your products or your knowledge or your data. But there are places and ways that we can actually work together as a mechanism to achieve large-scale impact, right? So we have the ability to respond in a very agile manner to many things. We have the contacts and connections to enable and make certain things happen. The technical knowledge and a lot of the data, right? And you also have, like, you know, analysts, tons of them, that can do many cool things that we cannot. And combining actually those two together in certain cases could achieve like real cool global impact and actually help the community, right? So I think, you know, we are pretty open to some ideas. So we are nonprofits in a way that, you know, we have to you have to respect our policies of doing things in a certain way that are not necessarily friendly from a commercial viewpoint. But you know, we can achieve certain things without really competing with you in any way, and just collaborating, right? So if you have data that you think we can share with the community, we are happy to do this. We do this for free. We don't take money for it from anybody. We can attribute it to you, give you full credits for everything. That is not our no problem at all. Our goal is to make sure the information reaches the right parties. So if you sinkhole something and you have the data from a campaign, whether it's criminal or state actor, and you're willing to share, please do. And if there is an incident of some kind that you see somewhere and you think that, well, it's not just my customers that could be alerted, but everybody, then perhaps, you know, we can also work together to implement also a scan. It's not just about the data as such. And sometimes it may also be about the honeypots or other joint operation of some kind, right? So yeah, that's it. I still have 7 minutes for my rather long, short small talk, but I hope it was insightful, and yeah, I'm here till Friday morning. And yeah, and if you like Shadowserver, etc., I have stickers, right? So please, happy to give away those as well. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any, please.